that.
McDonald's would be under, yeah.
But that, like that, the example there is, here's a crew member. She, serves people in Brazil, behind the counter, never left her country, and she went from singing in the early stages of this kind of process for a couple hundred people, and then there's professional vocal coaches that give them training, and they get wardrobe and hair and the whole glamorama, and then she's singing in front of 15,000 people. I mean, that's really life-changing. It's huge.
Cool. And so the question is she still at McDonald's, or is she
still with McDonald's?
Brazil Idol.
But she's still with McDonald's, but she is pursuing a singing career, and her manager is fully encouraging her. So she's taking singing lessons, she's taking English lessons, she's taking Spanish lessons.
I'd like to ask a question that's kind of off the mark of what we've been talking about. I believe you had said you had 6 years of same-store growth, which is phenomenal. Congratulations on that. My membership at 300 different markets from all different companies. They don't have the brand recognition as McDonald's would have and everything. And in this time of recession and stuff, they're looking for ways to market smarter with less. And I was just wondering if there's one way that you would, comes to mind that.
Is there any specific industries in particular you're thinking about all across the board?
Okay.
Well, then I'll give you some pretty general tenets. And I mean, in my 4 years of marketing and general management experience, I call on every single day, and it's going to sound basic, but it is, to really have impact with less money, you have to be smarter with every dollar that you spend. And it starts with really understanding who the target is. And there are still times that I can find, even within our own company, that we might execute something. I'm like, wait a second, well, we're really thinking about who the consumer target is literally in that moment with that choice of media that was picked. So really understanding who you're trying to influence, and another simple way I describe it to people who work for me is in what problem you're trying to solve. So really being as simple and clear about that, because sometimes people, and especially more junior marketing people, they get a little caught up in the buzzwords and a little caught up in I'm filling out a creative brief and I got to put certain words in there. They haven't just step back sometimes to go, who am I talking to and what am I trying to convince them of, or what problem am I trying to help solve in their life? And sometimes those simple lines of questioning can make whatever it is you're doing, whether it's a product or a piece of communication, resonate more. Because if you have something that breaks through the first time in whatever medium it is, and people remember it and it influences them, then your dollars have gone further. So that's kind of one. And the second piece is for marketers who have a little bit more money to spend. I'm a big fan of marketing analytics, and I can kind of go off on my statistical nerd side, so you'll have to forgive me. But return on marketing spend studies, which can be conducted in a whole host of ways, but are very, very effective in terms of really getting at underneath the sales responsiveness to what you're doing. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all trying to sell something in marketing. So, call it what it is. And using the tools that are out there to help you understand, okay, of these 10 things I did, which ones worked really well, which ones didn't. Because sometimes I think people are afraid to admit that something didn't work well. And I actually feel like the more failures you can identify, the better. Because when you find them, then you go, okay, that didn't work as well as I thought. Now I know what to fix. Or understanding the things that did work well, why they worked well, and you do more of them. I mean, how basic is that? Do more of what works, do less of what doesn't work. But again, sometimes we get all inundated with, fancy media plans and fancy GRPs and deliveries and all this, and I got to use all these different media, and I got to be cool and hip. It's like, okay, what's working and what's not? Okay. So, I mean, that sounds maybe basic, but honestly, that's the exact advice I would give to somebody asking me that, from a marketing company.
I got a question. You have a lot of stores, and they're all different. And they're not all different, but they're a lot different. So, for example, we have a McDonald's near us. And it's got a basketball thing for kids, and I live in a very kid. We have 2 kids, 5 and 4. They change their toys frequently. My wife always says, does McDonald's do, and my kids will ask where to go to eat, and they'll pick McDonald's, and not for the chicken nuggets. It's for the little toys that they get, right? So is there, are you guys reaching out to that younger, and by the way, little kids are younger, so therefore they're into all these different tools. So are you guys doing RSS feeds or things that are saying, oh, all these stores have these new toys, or all these stores have this new healthy, or...
What do you mean by RSS feeds? I'm sorry.
Well, say you're on a blog, or you're creating a blog or Twitter where people are joining, so that when a store launches it, mass goes out to
I would say
everybody.
we're not quite that sophisticated yet. How's that? I mean, I would say that I think we do a really good job of finding the right kind of store to build in a right kind of community, to your point. So I think we have good tools around understanding the demographics of an area, and, is this the kind of neighborhood where maybe a McCafe type restaurant, would do better, or something with a really elaborate playland. So I think we're pretty good about that. And we do some local store marketing that's more about the point of distribution, which is our restaurants. And we're beginning to do more kind of connecting that local store restaurant marketing opportunity to people in more efficient ways. But I wouldn't say we're expert at that yet. I think we're probably a little bit more expert on still doing things that are more a bigger geography at once.
Maybe you could talk to, though, the connection through the Happy Meals and like the Hotel for Dogs.
Yeah, well, that's, I mean, I guess a cool thing is, if your kids haven't discovered this one yet, is that we are, trying to modernize the Happy Meal toys. So right now in the U.S., we're running a tie-in with this movie Hotel for Dogs, which is a DreamWorks live-action film. It's doing really well. And this toy, for the first time, it's a cute little plush dog. But for the first time, we have codes on there, so then kids can go onto our website, which is called McWorld, and I'm sure you've seen things like Webkins and whatnot with the age of your kids. I've got 4 kids myself. I've been there. I've done it all. Essentially, you can go online and create, kind of a world for your dog. And there's a lot of creativity and imagination involved in it. And this McWorld website evolves pretty much every month. There's some news to it. And a lot of what we're trying to do is create fun with a purpose. So whether it's about using your imagination, encouraging physical activity, menu choices, bringing awareness to some of the things on the menu, we're trying to make all those strategic things come together at that point of fun for kids.
Have you thought about doing anything similar to what Starbucks is doing, where they've got a nice Starbucks idea and consumers send in information and kind of have a conversation back and forth with consumers about what's going on in the stores, what they like to see?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think we're just at the beginning of doing some of that stuff. I mean, we certainly have consumer feedback mechanisms, but more our focus right now in terms of real-time dialogue has been with crew, and our next area certainly will be more with consumers. And some markets are doing that a little bit more than others. I mean, certainly if you were to go to like Japan or Korea, where that's even more commonly done. We're using mobile phones for people to give us feedback and place orders and that kind of stuff. In some markets, we're not doing that everywhere yet. In Japan, a really cool thing is we have a relationship with Nintendo, and you can go in and get a download onto your DS of a free game just by going into the restaurant. So that's a little different than a feedback mechanism, but it is, there are ways that we're using technology around the system and around the world to advance connection with the brand, I'd say.
So when you're doing that, just to follow up.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
So when you're doing that feedback through employees, it sounds like mostly right now is where you have your listening posts. Are you doing that in some of these communities as well? The online communities you started talking about at the very beginning, are you using those mechanisms? What kind of mechanisms are you using to gather the employee feedback?
Yeah, to gather employee feedback?
Yeah, you said that's where you're doing a lot of your listening right now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, through those mechanisms. I mean, we're really involved in those employee internal mechanisms to get their feedback and their observations directly to, to the markets. We're very involved in that, yeah.
And I was just going to
one more question.
tying back to Becky's question and to your presentation, where do you see social media fitting into your brand promise? How are you using that, or how will you be using that?
If I can tack on to the end of that, you spoke about accountability and you're reliant on marketing analytics, which is smart, obviously. I don't need to tell you that, but when you start talking about social media, or even for that matter, traditional PR, where the accountability is not so clearly tied to the activity, how are you rationalizing your use of social channels if you are using social channels?
You mean in terms of how do we rationalize the effectiveness